So now let's alt-click on the body again to make that the active subtool. We'll zoom out and let's go ahead and take the clay tubes brush again. Just do a little bit more finessing of the body. If I look at it from the underside and take the move brush, I can now change the shape of that rib cage. I don't feel like it's coming out far enough. So I just want to move this so we get a little bit more volume in the rib cage. Bring the thoracic arch forward a little bit, maybe down. And then looking at the back, I just want to make sure that those shoulder blades are sitting at an angle as though they're laying against the volume of the rib cage underneath it. And then I'll take my damn standard brush and just make a nice indentation down the center of the back for where the spine will go. And just smooth that a little bit. Take my clay tubes brush and then just fill out the rhomboid muscles in between there. Now I'm going to add in the rest of the legs. So we'll go to B for brush, I for insert, go back to our IMM primitives brush, take the sphere, and we'll put in spheres for the knees. Press W for the move gizmo. Position those. And the rough form of the knee I treat as kind of a box. So I'll go to B for brush, T for trim, and I will select the trim dynamic brush, and that allows me to just knock back some planes on the sides here. So I'm just going to knock these back. Let's turn the draw size down on that a little bit. Smooth that. And let's do the other side. Smooth this back a little bit. Take the move brush and just get the general shape of that knee area in there. And clear the mask by control clicking and dragging once. Let's go to the geometry menu and just go to our Dynamesh. Make sure we still have Dynamesh on. Control click and drag once to clear the mask. Control click and drag a second time, and that will Dynamesh those shapes together, and I can smooth over that transition. Go back to my IMM primitives, and we'll add another sphere. Go to the transpose gizmo. Let's unlock it, reset it with the reset button, and then lock it again. Let's go to the unmasked mesh center, scale that down just a bit, and we'll position this, and then scale this down, and this is going to be the lower leg. And I'm going to take my move brush and start to adjust the shapes of the calf muscles here. Let's bring this in a little bit. And let's bring this back so we get just that little bit of curvature of the leg. There we go. And let's bring this up. Again, that's the wedging that I was talking about earlier, where each form of the body kind of wedges into the one above it and below it. So I just want to make sure that I'm getting those calf muscles interlocking up into the upper leg by attaching back there at the back of the knee. And we'll snap to a side view, bring that in a little bit, bring that down, clear the mask, and then execute Dynamesh. And let's put some feet on here. I like the idea of there being kind of these big, almost elephant-like feet, just these big blocky feet. So let's make a big sphere. Go to the unmasked mesh center, unlock it, reset it, then lock it again. And then we'll just position these like so. And then I can go to the transform gizmo modifiers here, and I can go to taper, and then we can just sort of taper these like this. And I can adjust the fall off like so. And then I will go to the gear again and click accept. Go to the gear one more time, and let's click flatten. And I will just flatten the underside here by grabbing this cone and dragging it up. And click the gear and accept. Now we have a whole chapter on the transpose gizmo and the transpose modifiers. So we talk about those in more depth later on, but I just wanted to use them here because it's a nice way to get this sort of flat sort of pachyderm-like foot, something you might see on a rhinoceros or an elephant. There we go, and I will clear the mask and then execute Dynamesh. Resist the urge to refine them too much at this stage. We're just trying to get the basic shapes together. That's it. Go to my clay tubes brush with no alpha, and I'm just going to rough in the side muscle of the thigh here. That's called the vastus lateralis muscle. And then there's the vastus medialis muscle over here. And both of them have a little tendon that grab either side of the knee. So just grab those. Start to rough in a little kneecap there and let that connect to the shin bone right here, the tibia. And there's a little bit of fat right there. And that's the rectus femoris muscle here. So I just want to rough those in. Again, don't get too specific. We just want to rough in shapes right now. That's all. Take my move brush, maybe pull this in a little bit. Go to my clay tubes brush and get these a little bit more resolved. There we go. And I'm going to go to my clay tubes brush and sort of build out some little toe-like shapes here. And take my damn standard brush, start to just etch in a little division between those. And we'll further refine those later. Just want to get those etched out, just like that. And I'm going to mask these. Invert the mask, take the move brush, and just pull these out. Let's clear that mask. We'll do the same for the other toes. And I'm going to leave them spread out for right now because the next step is we're going to actually remesh this and turn this into a subdivision model. Invert that mask. Make sure that we've got everything caught. We don't want to have that little portion of that toe unmasked. We'll pull these out, clear the mask, and then let's do the middle toe. Let's mask this, invert the mask, and pull this out. Clear the mask and execute Dynamesh. Now I'll just take my clay tubes brush and just do a little bit of roughing in shapes here. Again, resist the urge to get too specific right now. I always treat Dynamesh as pretty much a sketching tool, as a way to establish volumes. And I try and resist putting too much detail into the Dynamesh phase, because the Dynamesh, you're typically dealing with, quite a heavy mesh. We have 1 million polygons right now and no subdivision levels. So that's going to make it a bit hard to go in and resolve form because you're dealing with so many polys. And that makes life difficult. If we remesh this and turn it into a subdivision model, then we will be able to actually go in there and get more refined in the shapes that we're making. So Dynamesh is fantastic. It's a wonderful tool, and I think it's best suited for establishing volumes, not for doing your final detailing. I think that it's far too dense for that. And that's kind of a feel that you'll get for ZBrush. It comes with experience, but I think it's really important as you move forward with the program is to understand when and why you would want to use subdivision levels. And we have a whole chapter where we just talk about sculpting on a subdivision model. And of course, we have the quick start chapter, which you've already seen at this point, most likely, if you were watching in order, where we just do a Dynamesh. The feel that I expect you'll get over time is just understanding how you're able to achieve a certain level of subtlety in the way the shapes interrelate to each other when you can move between your subdivision levels. And if you don't have those subdivision levels, then it becomes a bit harder to get that kind of nuanced form. And that's just so important. It's what makes a ZBrush model not look lumpy, which is a danger, is when you're working with too many subdivisions right out of the gate, and your model can take on kind of a lumpy, unappealing look. The forms don't feel well resolved. And it's kind of a hallmark of everybody's first ZBrush models. I recently found my first ZBrush models in an old hard drive, and they had that same lumpy look, and it just took me time to learn how to get away from that, how to work your form. And I started using ZBrush in version 1.5, so we didn't even have Dynamesh yet. We didn't even have subtools then. So everything was pretty much based in working between subdivision levels. So I'm going to step back now, and these legs are too long. So I'm going to utilize the polygroups I have already here because we're using insert meshes, and Control-Shift-Click on each one to hide everything but the legs. Make sure we get this. And then I'm going to go to my transpose line, and we'll drag this up here. And let's mask all of this, and then I'll just shrink those down a little bit. Let's invert visibility and mask all of this just by control-clicking and dragging a marquee around it. And there we go. We can just shrink those down. That body proportion feels a little bit better to me. Now we'll clear the mask and execute Dynamesh. So now I've got all the volumes that I want. At this stage, I'm ready to turn this into a subdivision model that I can now continue working on. Now, you don't have to do this step. You could easily carry on sculpting in Dynamesh, but I think this is really helpful to do this. I will go to Subtools, and I'm going to duplicate my model. I'm going to turn off visibility on the eyeballs. The reason I do that is because we're going to project this mesh onto our original after we remesh it. Turn on Solo, so all I see is my currently selected model, and I will go to Geometry, and I will turn off Dynamesh, open up Z-Remesher, and I'm going to set my target polygon count. I'll set that to maybe 3,000 or 4,000 faces. Make sure X symmetry is turned on, so I have a symmetrical remesh, and then I'm going to click Z-Remesher. Now, we have another chapter where we talk in depth about Z-Remesher and using it and all of its features. All we're doing here is we're creating a low-resolution version of our model that's made of quads. It's not triangulated, it's all quad geometry. Then we're going to divide that and project it back onto the Dynamesh, which is the subtool that we duplicated. That will capture all of our detail, but give us subdivision levels that we can move between. If we can move between subdivision levels, we can then pose the model, we can change the body positioning easier, we can move down into a lower subdivision level and make big shape changes. So you can see here, there's my low resolution version of the model. Now, I still have the high resolution there. I just can't see it because I've turned on Solo. There it is. It's sitting in the exact same space. I'll turn on Solo again and press Control-D to divide the mesh once. I have one subdivision level now. So I'll go to Subtool, go to the Project menu right here, turn off Color, and then press Project All. And it will shrink wrap that subdivided model onto the Dynamesh, which is currently not visible. I'll divide again and click Project All. And you see what it's going to do? It's going to capture those mesh details. So this is our second projection now. And now let's zoom into the face and see how this looks. So I think we could do one more. Let's divide one more time. And I will click Project All. And it's just shrink wrapping this model, the one I just divided, onto this one, which is hidden. It's still visible, or it's not visible, it's still there. I just have Solo turned on so you don't see it. And that's the one that has all the detail in there. Everything that we've sculpted so far in the Dynamesh mode. So we'll let this complete. Because we're projecting more polygons at this point, it's going to take a little bit longer. And there we go. Now, if I switch from this tool to this one, you see there's little to no difference between them. However, this one is a Dynamesh. This one does not have subdivision levels. This one is the one that we just remeshed and reprojected. It has 4 subdivision levels. Also notice it's only 800,000 faces, whereas this one is 1 million. Because it's Dynameshed, it's denser. So we don't need the Dynamesh anymore. I can go to Subtool and click Delete on that one. Because this one has all the same details, but it has subdivisions. If I press Shift-D, I can step down, and D steps me up. Shift-D steps down, D steps up. This is the same as using these buttons here. I can go to Low Res or High Res, and those hotkeys you see are Shift-D and D. So The reason subdivision levels are nice, if I step down to a lower level, I can take my move brush now and I can make really big shape changes to the model, and it's not going to keep that sort of lumpy look that you get if you make those changes at a much higher subdivision level. Now, I don't have my polygrouping anymore, but I can easily reintroduce that by going to B for brush, S for select, and I could go to select lasso. Click OK. The select lasso allows me to press Control Shift and then click and drag and create a selection marquee. In select lasso, if I mouse over an edge and click an edge like this, it'll hide that whole edge loop going around the arm. So then if I go down to my polygroup menu and click auto groups, it will group the arms separately from the torso. So let's go ahead and invert visibility. Let's hide those arms. Oops. And invert visibility. Oops. Invert visibility by Control Shift, clicking and dragging on the background. Let's hide this and hide. Well, we'll keep that. So that extra ring of faces there, I'm just going to click Group Visible, and that groups the arms and that ring of faces together. And then I've got the body separate. So let's do the same thing for the legs. I'll come down here, Control Shift click on a ring going around the legs. I might have to continue that ring like this. There we go. I will click Auto Group. Now I'm going to press B for brush, S for select, R for rectangle. So I'm no longer using the lasso select, I'm using the rectangle select. So now I can Control Shift click and hide the legs, hide the arms, and then I can just polygroup the torso together by going to Group Visible. There we go. So now I've got the legs and arms separated out, and I can carry on sculpting. So now that I've got the legs and arms separated, I'll isolate the arms, and I'm going to mask them. And I'm going to mask the shoulders a bit here. I want to widen the shoulders. So I'm going to mask all this. Control click on the background to invert the mask, and then I'm going to go to the transpose gizmo, go to the unmasked mesh center, and we'll hold down the Alt key and move this up. And I'm just going to bring those shoulders out, and there we go. That just broadens those shoulders. That's so much better. If I undo that, you can see the difference. So I like that much better. I'll clear my mask. And because I'm down here at a lower subdivision level, it's much, much easier for me to grab big shapes and move them around. Let's pull out the chest muscles here. Let's pull the clavicle, or the shoulder blade, not shoulder blades, pardon me, the clavicles, the collarbones down and forward. Let's pull that skin to the neck down. And I'll go with my clay tubes brush. I just want to fill out this little indentation here. Step back up our subdivisions. And there we go. I like some of this sort of hanging fatty tissue here. Let's fill that in. And I'll go to my damn standard brush. I want to put a little shape there where there might be kind of an auditory organ, some kind of ear. I want to indent the temple here. Take my clay tubes brush and hold down the Alt key and just sort of push those shapes in a little bit. And in this eye area, I'm going to take my standard brush and I'm going to change to Alpha 1. I'm just going to bring those eyelids out. Turn off solo so I can see the eyeballs. Go back up to my subtools and make sure the eyeball is turned on the eyeball subtools. Take my move brush, and we'll just adjust the shapes of the eyes here. Take the damn standard brush, and just carve in a little indentation here. There we go. And I'm going to deepen those nostrils a little bit. I like these sort of apertures here in the face. They could be anything. Let's go ahead and deepen those, and I'll take the standard brush and just build up a little bit on the sides of those. Build up these nose shapes again. There we go. And I'll start thinking about the lips here. I'll use the standard brush to build out the lips. Build that up. And I'm going to press Control S and save my work. My save menu's on the other screen. I'm just saving into my personal save folder. There we go. I like to save project files. I encourage beginner users to save project files too. Z-tools are just the tool. It's just the current tool you're working on. Whereas if you save a project, it saves everything that's currently open in ZBrush. And I'm just using that damn standard brush to kind of etch in some folds of skin here. Take the clay tubes brush, and I'm just going to use the clay tubes brush to sculpt across this shape here. And let's build up those cheekbones. And let's come back to our shoulders. Let's build up the deltoid muscle here. Get the pectoralis muscles that are radiating over from the chest and inserting into the arm. I'll step down my subdivisions, take the move brush, and we can sort of refine this point of connection here. Do a little bit of smoothing, just all of this, and then step back up, and that detail is reintroduced, but it's just a little bit more subtle now. Take the clay tubes brush, and let's think about the bicep here. Let's step down a couple subdivisions and smooth this back. Smooth that. Let's bring that bicep down. Make sure that inserts into the forearm. I'll take the damn standard brush, do a little indentation down the center of it, and smooth that. And the forearm muscles here, those extensors, that come up and insert into a little V up here. And then let's get the tricep muscle here. I'll take the clay tubes brush and just sort of build up the volume of that, just like so. Now here, this is a really good example of why it's nice to have a lower subdivision level. I want to pull the trapezius and the muscles coming off the shoulder blade down. So I'm going to Control-Shift-Click, mask the arm so I don't affect it. Maybe expand that mask up just a little bit. Take my move brush and pull this down. And that's going to make that back feel a lot more realistic. If we look at it from the front, and it's going to be hard to see because of the shadowing in the background. I'm going to go to the document, take range, and turn range down so that the background is more gray. You can see from the front that back wall of the armpit on a chest that's so broad. We want to see that. That's going to make that transition into the torso a lot more realistic. So let's go ahead and clear our mask. I'm going to take my clay tubes brush and just fill this area out here and get those muscles that are coming off of the shoulder blade and grabbing onto the humerus bone. Let's get these muscles here that attach from the border of the scapula to the spine. Those are rhomboid muscles. And I'm just using my clay tubes brush to kind of sculpt in the direction of the muscle flow. I've spent a lot of time doing cadaver lab and studying anatomy, and it's a wonderful hobby. It's a wonderful thing professionally to have in your toolbox. I think the most important thing, if I could go back to the beginning and give myself advice, I would say learn the origin and insertion of every muscle first, more so than even worrying about the names. And I think knowing the names is really helpful. But if you just know the origin and insertion, and you take your clay tubes brush and you stroke in that direction, stroke from the origin of a muscle group down to the insertion where it ends. And as long as you've got those strokes going in the right direction pretty much, it's going to look right. So it may not be absolutely clinically accurate, but it's also an alien. We don't know what clinical accuracy is for an alien, but the important part is that the viewer looks at it and it feels true. And that's a really good way to go about doing that, is to just take your brush and stroke in the direction of those muscle flows. So here I'm going to take the flexors, for example. I know the flexors insert up here, also in kind of a V shape, and they flow down here towards the palm. So I'm just running my brush in the general direction in which they flow. And I'll hold down the Alt key with the clay tubes brush, and that helps me just knock back a little plane there. Smooth some of this back. Let's build this up, smooth that back, and then step back up our subdivision levels. Now I'm going to step back down, and I just want to get the silhouette right, just taking the move brush. And I just want to get this inserting up a little bit higher. Maybe I'll build out that tricep muscle there. And let's pull this in a little bit here. Oops, there we go. Pull this in. Go to our damn standard brush. Etch that in. Zoom out. There you can see what I'm talking about with just the direction of the muscle, getting it pretty much going from the origin towards the insertion. I'm going to take the standard brush, just bring out that little bony landmark there again, the ulna. And on the thumb side, I am going to create a little hollow right here. It's just two tendons that are lying on either side of the bony landmark that corresponds to this one on this part of the wrist. But you can't see that one because it's deeper under the surface. There we go. Let's go ahead and reveal all again. And I'll take my clay tubes brush and just start to sculpt where the abdominal muscles are grabbing onto the ribs here. Start to suggest some ribs. We don't have to be really specific. Take the standard brush. I don't want to build them out too much. I do want to use the negative value of the brush to push them in a little bit and step back up my subdivision levels, and you can see how that comes across on the surface. I'll go to my trim dynamic brush, and I just want to knock back some planes there. I just want to get those a little bit flatter. I don't want them to be too inflated. Take the standard brush, step down a few subdivisions, and hold on the shift key and just do a little bit of smoothing there. Go back to my standard brush. Remember, I have alpha 1 turned on for my standard brush. That just makes the point finer. I just want to suggest those ribs there. Take my clay tubes brush and just refine that. Let's get the xiphoid process, a little pokey out bit right there at the rib cage. Just build up those pectoralis muscles again. And work that deltoid. Just going to sculpt across that form there. Hold down the Alt key and I'll just knock that back a little bit and then give it some smooth. And I'll take my damn standard brush and I'm just going to stroke lightly in the direction of the muscle fibers. And all of this will be smoothed out a bit in a moment, so it doesn't matter if it's overstated. It's totally fine because we are going to smooth that back. Do the same thing here. I'm just thinking about how these muscles interrelate to one another. Just do a little bit of smoothing. Step down, take my smooth brush and turn down my Z intensity. Do a little bit of smoothing through here and then step back up and it'll reintroduce those striations, but they're more subtle now. Let's go ahead and fix this little ledge that we made here. Step down our subdivision level and I can smooth this much more effectively because there's less geometry to deal with. Step back up and then smooth it again. I'll turn up my Z intensity on it. There we go. Go to the clay tubes brush. Let's fill out the buttocks there. Take the damn standard brush, just get the gluteal fold. Step all the way down my subdivisions. Do a little bit of smoothing here, and then just take the move brush and bring the adductor muscles together where they're joining with the pubic bone. There we go. Now, I want to enlarge the whole body compared to the head, because the head is quite large compared to the body, which makes the character feel younger, or feel like if you've got a larger head to body ratio, it can make something feel smaller. So if I take my transpose gizmo, position it at the base of the skull again, I want to scale from here, and then just click drag. I can scale this out, make that head much smaller compared to the body. And that changes the way the character is perceived. Let's come down here to these toes, take the move brush. We can sort of scooch these around. Let's get the shape refined in here. Let's smooth this back. Take the damn standard brush. Just gonna put a little crease underneath there. Take my clay tubes brush. Let's fix some of these dents in here. Let's fix this. Take the move brush, just position this. Step back up my subdivisions. Take my clay tubes brush again. Let's just think about the anatomy that's in there, the bones of those toes. Take the standard brush. I don't use the dam standard for this one. I'm using standard. The dam standard makes a really sharp line. The standard brush will make a softer line. Push these in. Push that in. Take the move brush. Bring these down. Let's step down our subdivisions. There we go. Now I want to move the knees up. So I'm going to mask this area out, invert the mask, go to my transpose gizmo, click that, go to unmasked mesh center button there. And I'm just going to bring those knees up a little bit, just like that. And I'm going to smooth this area, clear the mask, smooth that out a little bit, and then step back up my subdivision levels, and it'll reintroduce my sculpted detail, and I won't have a problem anymore with there being a line there. There we go. So coming back to the head here, some nice shapes happening here that I like. I use the standard brush just to build this up. I'm going to build up that cheekbone. And I'll go to the damn standard brush again, just create some sort of furrows right here at the brow. Go to my clay tubes brush, and I just want to fill out this transition here, because I don't want that to be like it's skinned. There is skin and fat on top of that, so I just want to fill that out so it's not so cut. We'll take the move brush, just adjust this transition like this. Go to our clay tubes brush. And just, once again, just sort of sculpting in the direction of the muscle. There we go. Zoom out. I'll step down my subdivisions. Just a little bit of smoothing here. Step back up. And I'll save my work. Just Control S to save. So I'm going to step down just a couple subdivisions, take my clay tubes brush, turn down my focal shift, and just do a little bit more work on the pecs and some of the other relationships between the muscles here. Bring in the sternum, or the sternum here. Take the move brush. By the way, I'm using my hotkeys to switch between brushes when you don't see the brush menu come up. And I have a chapter on interface customization where we talk about setting up hotkeys. So if you have not seen hotkey setup, that's where you'll find it. Just going to adjust this, bring this forward just a bit, and I'm going to Control-Shift-Click to hide the arms so I can work on the legs without the hands getting in the way. Go to the Clay Tubes brush, work that vastus lateralis, vastus medialis. Take the move brush and just bring that kneecap up a little bit and just do a little bit of smoothing through here. And I'm just looking at the silhouette, adjusting how these forms read in the outermost perimeter. And I'm happy for it to be kind of a thick ankle here. They are kind of, like I said, sort of almost like elephant feet. I'm going to take the move brush and bring these up a little bit. Take the Clay Tubes brush and let these transition into the ankle more gradually like this. There we go. And I'll take my damn standard brush and just sort of sketch in some of these forms in the back of the leg here. The bicep femoris is the big muscle at the back of the thigh, so we're just going to work that and wedge that around the gastrocnemius, the calf muscle here. And I'm happy for these shapes to be overstated because I will come back and just push them back using the Clay Tubes brush or the trim dynamic like I'm doing right here, and just knocking back planes on these forms to make them a little bit more resolved. And switching back to my Clay Tubes brush. Then I can just smooth this. We'll step down a subdivision level, turn our Z intensity down on the smooth brush, and just give a little bit of smooth to these forms. And then step back up. You see that makes everything just a little bit more subtle. Step down again. I'll take my Clay Tubes brush and let's work into that kneecap again. Take my damn standard brush, turn down my Z intensity. And I'm just thinking about the divisions between these muscles here. The little bony landmark there of the great trochanter of the femur. If we go to the back here on the buttocks, we can bring this in a little bit. Bring this in. And take our Clay Tubes brush. And it's the tensor fasciae lata there. And then the gluteus maximus muscles here. And just get that transition from the glutes down into the leg. And I'll take my move brush and sort of adjust some of these forms here. Make sure that I get the widest point of the rib cage, which would be about here. I want to pull this out. There we go. Clay Tubes brush. And I'm just stroking between the muscle forms so I can sort of merge parts together. I can make them feel a bit more unified. We don't want to have sort of like a super deep indentation in between each muscle. We want to let some things kind of blend together, as it were. Let's come down here. And I am going to step down to my lowest subdivision level. I'm going to frame mode. And I'm going to isolate these toes just by using my visibility marquee. Now, the polygons are single-sided, so if I go to the bottom of my tool menu and go to Display Properties, turn on double-sided, I'll be able to see through to make sure I've got everything selected. So let's go ahead and hide these and hide these. that right up to there, invert visibility, and I'm just going to go to polygroups, group visible. And let's hide these. Actually, I accidentally got the arms in that, so let's group visible to get the arms grouped differently. There we go. It looks like the same color, but it's very slightly different. I'm going to change to B for brush. Oops. I'm going to change to B for brush, S for select, L for lasso. I'm going to use the lasso select for the other toes. So let's go ahead and lasso select these. There we go. And now I can group visible on those. And we'll do the same thing for these. Let's lasso select these. And then we can group visible on these. Now this is just going to make life easier, so I can Control Shift click. Let's go back to B for brush, S for select, R for rectangle. Now we can mask these toes, invert the mask, and go to our transpose gizmo again. And I'm just going to Alt click right here, and I can hold the Alt key down, move my pivot point, and then I can just scooch these toes so they're pressing together a little bit more, which is what I want. I'll do the same thing for these toes here. Let's mask those. Invert the mask, go to our transpose gizmo. We'll just move this one over here, and then just bring those toes together. There we go. And clear the mask. Take the move brush. Now this is a neat trick that you can do. With your move brush, go to the brush menu, go to auto masking, and then turn on mask by polygroups. Turn it all the way up to 100. So now if I click on a polygroup, my move brush is only going to impact the polygroup upon which I touch. So it makes it easy to work on things that are nudged up really close together like this. Like if I want to change the shape of these toes so they're really pressed against one another, it's much easier to do that now because my brush is only going to impact whatever polygroup I touch when I first set my brush down. So this helps me create these toes and create a feeling of these toes kind of smooshing together against each other. I'm going to go to B for brush, P for pinch, press I for the pinch brush, and then I'll just pinch together these areas here. Go to our clay tubes brush, and let's just build up some of this volume up here at the back of the top of the foot, and then we'll step up a subdivision level. And once again, you see this brush is only affecting whatever polygroup I happen to touch first. I'll take my damn standard brush. Let's do a little crease on the sides of the toes here. Turn up my Z intensity. Let's turn off frame mode. Take my clay tubes brush again to just build up the front of those. And now I'll go back to brush and turn that polygroups mask down to 0. You have to be a little careful when you use that because it's a global setting. It will affect all of your brushes. And if you forget that it's turned on, you might find that your brushes are behaving strangely and you don't remember why. And it's very easy to do that. I still do that to this day. Sometimes I'll turn that on, maybe step away, go to lunch, come back, and then I've forgotten that I've turned that on. So after a couple minutes, my brush is doing something I don't expect it to do, and I'm just thinking, why is that doing that? And then it occurs to me that I have mask by polygroups turned on. So just keep that in mind. Just working those muscles of the thigh here. Go to my damn standard brush, and I just want to get that sort of curve right there. Do a little bit of smoothing in this area. It's really nice to kind of smooth as you work. I'll go to the Trim Dynamic brush, and that will allow me to sort of knock back a little bit of a plane right here. I don't want to smooth this muscle form. I just want to change the angle in the silhouette right here. There we go. And I'm going to take my clay tubes brush again. I'm just going to adjust the shin bone here. And I'm going to build up the volume in the toes, the top of the toes, the back of the foot, or the top of the foot, as it were. There we go. Damn standard brush again. Just create some little creases, little rolls. down here at the back, bottom of the feet, the heels. There we go. And go back to my damn standard brush. This is a really good brush just for sort of sketching in divisions between muscles, but I always kind of caution people against sort of outlining every muscle completely and leaving it that way. You do want to smooth it back and sort of let some of those areas get lost a little bit. Take my move brush, and I just want to adjust the shapes of the arm here. I'm going to mask that, invert the mask, and then control-click on the masked area, and that will soften the edges of the mask. Take the inflate brush, B for brush, I for inflate. The inflate brush is here, and then we can just sort of inflate those muscles there. That is the tricep. I'll take my clay tubes brush, just bring that down to the elbow right there. And from the side view, I want to isolate the arm. Take the move brush, and I just want to get a really clear point where that humerus comes straight down. We've got the elbow there. Take my clay tubes brush again, get those flexor muscles here. Let's go down here to the hand. Let's build up this knuckle. Take the standard brush. Take the smooth brush. Just knock this back just a little bit. Now I have that smooth Z intensity turned down. I'm going to take the inflate brush and inflate these fingertips. I like this to be kind of big, rounded fingertips. Use the inflate brush along here just to widen those. And let's make these sort of inflated as well. Take the move brush and just adjust those shapes. And I'll take the damn standard brush, do little creases here. And I'll use the standard brush with alpha 1 just to build up sort of the bones at the back of the hand here. There we are. Take our take our damn standard brush and just think about those muscles in the forearm. Again, just sort of sketching in the direction from origin to insertion. There we go. And let's reveal all again and clear our mask. Take our clay tubes brush, just going to build this up a little bit. Suggest a nipple right there, step back up, and let's just get that nipple in there. And I'll take my clay tubes brush, turn my focal shift down and my Z intensity down. And I just want to make sure that these shapes flow into the rest of the body nicely. Now here I've got this little indentation here that I don't really like, so I'm going to step down, take my move brush, and just want to pull that back just a little bit, just adjust those shapes. Step back up. And just looking at my silhouette. Remember, you still do have the silhouette view here that you can use as a guide as well. I'm going to step down and just smooth this area back. Step back up. You see it reintroduces the detail, but it's just a little bit more subtle. Step back down. And I'm going to hide the arms, I think. And I want to pull this shape over here. So I'm just going to take the move brush and pull this over. Now I'm going to reveal all again. Do a little bit of smoothing here. Bring this in. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to isolate the arms, mask the body, and now I'm going to do that again. Let's feather that mask by control clicking on it, and I just want to bring this over a little bit. And invert that mask, feather the edges, and let's just adjust this shoulder. There we go. And I'll go back in with my damn standard brush. We'll just put a little navel here. Make it a little outy navel right there. There we go. And I'm going to turn off my X symmetry now. I want to put some asymmetrical details into the body here. Don't want everything to be perfectly symmetrical on both sides because that's kind of unnatural looking. We don't want that. You know, the muscles are somewhat symmetrical. The skeleton's somewhat symmetrical. You know, it's definitely a symmetrical creatures, but you don't want perfect symmetry in all of your surface details. That's going to make things look really strange. So it's a nice habit to get into, to always be thinking about asymmetry. Come up here, and let's go ahead and fill out this little indentation here. I'm going to turn up my Z intensity on my brush just a little bit. One of the nice things about the clay brush, or the clay tubes brush, it's based on the clay brush, and the clay brushes fill into the recesses first, so it's a nice way to fill in sort of an indentation that's maybe too deep without upsetting the surface form too much. I'm going to take the move brush and just expand out the jaw here a little bit. And then let's come back into the mouth. I'm going to use the damn standard brush to etch in the divisions between the lips again. And I'll take the standard brush, create a little ledge to the upper lip and the lower lip. Take the clay tubes brush, just get this little bit of fatty tissue here on the corners of the mouth. Think about the tip of the chin there. And I'll take my damn standard brush and just do a little bit of a creasing in here. Turn off my X symmetry. Folds of flesh and wrinkles in the face are a really good candidate for places to introduce asymmetry. I'll take the inflate brush and I will inflate the lips together using the inflate brush. I'm going to turn this Z intensity down, and I just want to make those lips press against each other like this. And let's bring the corners of the mouth together like that, just by inflating them together. There we are. Turn my X symmetry off again, take my damn standard brush, just want to do a little bit of shape changes around the eye, just putting some nuance in here. Again, it's really desirable to have some asymmetry in this sort of area, so I want to do it separately on each eye. Take the standard brush. Now this I will turn symmetry on for because I'm making sort of a big change to the eyelid. I'm going to mask out the upper lid, invert the mask, and let's go ahead and hide everything but this area so we can get into it a lot easier. I'll take the move brush, and I'm just going to pull this eyelid out because it's going in too deep in the corner. Bring that out. Take the standard brush. There we go. Take the move brush. I just want to tug that eye corner over. And let's just pull it back just a little bit right here. And reveal all again. Let's invert that mask by control clicking on the background. Let's take the inflate brush and just give a little bit of inflate to the eye bags. Clear our masking. There we go. Now I'll turn my X symmetry off again and start thinking about the brow. We don't want the furrow lines in the brow to be perfectly symmetrical. That's a real dead giveaway, and it will stand out. So we let these be asymmetrical. It'll add a lot of character. And I'm going to make the wrinkles coming out of the mouth area, make those asymmetrical as well. And this is just the damn standard brush, that's all. I'm just making sort of a crisscross pattern here for some skin texture, some larger folds and wrinkle forms. Now I'll turn my X symmetry back on and start working into this aperture for the nose here. And I like this recessed area down in here. I'm going to mask this out and invert it. Take the inflate brush, and I want to sort of inflate this, and then we'll smooth it and inflate it again. So there's sort of like a, almost like a spherical shape inside there, a rounded shape. So that's a very interesting thing there. That could be texture painted to look like something sort of like translucent or skin-like in there. We'll go to our clay tubes brush, and I'm going to build up the muscle, the temporalis muscle, which fills out this hollow, the sides of the head. So I just want to get a little bit of a sense of that temporalis muscle there. There we go. Build up the masseter muscle again here at the corners of the mouth, or the corners of the jaw. There we go. And I'm just going to very lightly run my dam standard brush in the direction of the muscles that make up the pectoralis. They radiate out from here, like I said, and just give that a little bit of a smooth, so they're not quite so overstated. I'm going to step down a couple subdivisions and just build up that sternum again. There we are. Step back up, and those changes propagate up the chain. There we go. Let's just go ahead and step down. Control N will clear the canvas. And take the move brush, and I just want to bring this rib cage out and forward. There we go. And again, make sure that we get that widest point of the rib cage here. And take the smooth brush, just do a little bit of smoothing there. Take the clay tubes brush. I've got a little dent there I want to fix. I'm just going to fill that with clay tubes. Step down, smooth that a bit, step back up. There we go. Now I'm going to go to the draw menu, and I'm going to go to a wider angle lens here. Just change that focal length to like 28, 24. Just make it a wider angle lens. And I'm going to go to the light menu, and I'm just going to move my key light by clicking this orange dot, move it up to about 11 o'clock, and that gives me a nice dramatic lighting. So that's kind of nice. Let's go ahead and do a little bit more work on the feet here. I'm going to take the move brush, and I'm just going to bring these up. Take the clay tubes brush, and I just want to get that transition up into the foot a little bit better. Take the standard brush, hold down the Alt key, and just want to get a sense of sort of the bony structures of the toe there. I'm going to mask out this area, invert the mask, take the move brush, and just push that in just a little bit. So there's a little bit more of a delineation between what is that toe and what's the rest of the foot. There we go. Clear the mask. There we go. So let's say that you've gotten this far and you need to make a change to the body. So something that's going to change the overall volumes. Now remember, we're not in Dynamesh anymore. Now I just want to show you before we finish how very simple it is to bounce back and forth between Dynamesh and a subdivision model. So let's say you've decided that you want to make a bust out of this. So you need to slice off part of the body. Easy to do. So what we'll do is we'll go back to Dynamesh, but this time we've got a lot more detail. So what I need to do is duplicate my model, we'll come down here to geometry. We will delete our lower subdivision levels, go to Dynamesh, and then this time this Dynamesh value of 128 probably won't be enough because we've got a much larger model now. I'm going to turn on solo so you can only see the one that I'm working on. If I Dynamesh it now, we're probably not going to capture all of our detail. We'll have to go into frame mode and see. Well, actually, that's not too bad, but no. Yeah, you see we're losing a lot of form in here that I want to keep. All right, so what I'll do is I will undo that, and I will turn my resolution up. Let's just turn it up to somewhere around 300. And then I'm going to turn on project. Project is going to project the Dynamesh onto the original in memory. It's not projecting it onto the copy. It's just doing that process in memory. And that can help you get a finer detailed mesh out of your Dynamesh. You capture more of your detail that way. So you see it's taking a little bit longer because we have a much more dense model this time. And we are projecting as we are Dynameshing. So this is going to, ZBrush has to think about a bit more. And there we go. The Dynamesh is finished. Now you see it's captured much more of the detail. So let's say that I don't want the full body. Maybe I want to just turn this into a bust, or perhaps I need to add more shapes to it. Maybe somebody comes along and says, hey, that character needs to have horns. So we'll do both. We'll take something away and we'll add something. So a nice way to split the model apart. I'm going to save my work really quick before I move on. A nice way to delete parts of the model is to use the trim brush, which is B for brush, T for trim. There is a trim, B for brush, T for trim. There's a series of trim brushes here. It's trim curve, trim circle. I will try trim curve to start with. Or actually, let's do something a bit easier. We'll do trim rectangle. Now, if I take the trim rectangle, turn off perspective mode, and do Control Shift, click and drag, and then hold down the Alt key, it makes this sort of rectangle. So I'll bring the rectangle down to about here. Now what this does is it slices away and deletes everything inside that rectangle. So if I go into frame mode now, you can see the rest of the body's gone. It's just given me this. And if I Control Shift click, that's been polygrouped separately from the rest of the body, which is also kind of handy. Now let's add something. I need to put some horns on the character. So let's say I mask out some circles here on the sides of the head, invert that mask, and then I can take the move brush and I can pull some horns out like this with the move brush. We'll make them like short little horns, and then we'll make some that are much bigger. I'll go to my brush settings, go to curve, and turn on accurate curve mode, and that makes my brush come to a much sharper point, like this. I'll invert that mask, then I'll zoom in, and just take my clay tubes brush, and let's just build up just a transitional area between the horn and the skin, like this. There we are. And let's invert that mask. take our damn standard brush and I'll just run some striations up there so there's a little bit of surface detail on these horns. That'll be nice to catch the paint or the color when you were texture painting. So let's clear the mask. That's one way that we can add some form. Now let's do something a little bit different. Let's make a larger set of horns, maybe just behind it. I'll go to B for brush, C for curve, and there is a curve tube brush here. I'll select that, and then I will click and drag like this, and that creates a curve, and there's a tube that extends along that curve. If I click an endpoint, I can move the curve. If I mouse along the curve, my brush is blue. That tells me that I'm able to edit the curve. Now, if I move away from the curve, my brush becomes red. Now, if I change my draw size while my brush is red, and then touch the blue again, it changes the size of the tube. So if I make my brush bigger and then touch the curve, it becomes bigger. Turn my brush size down and then touch the curve, it becomes smaller. So let's go ahead and make these horns. So I want to actually change where they're attaching to the head. So let's grab the curve and let's bring these down here. Maybe I want these horns to come in back here behind the others. So I'll grab the end point and I'll move the end point here. Let's pull this out. Now, as long as that curve is there, you can edit the tube. But as soon as I click somewhere on the model that's not the curve will go away. And then I will no longer be able to edit the brush. If I want to extend this line, I just come to the end here. And you see as I mouse away from it, I get this red line. That allows me to continue that curve like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and change the size of these horns. I'm going to go to the stroke menu. I'll go to curve, and under curve, you see I've got lock start and lock end. I'm going to lock the start point. So what that means is if I click the end point and move it around, the start point is not going to move. That helps me place or shape the horns. Now I'll go back to the stroke menu and I will go to curve modifiers, turn on size, and then open the curve fall off. This is the size of the tube at the beginning of the curve. This is the size of the tube at the end. I'm going to flip this flip this horizontally like this so it goes from big to small, and I don't want it to go perfectly tiny, so I'm going to turn that up a little bit. Now, if I touch the curve, they taper off. Now I want to make these horns a little bit bigger, so I'm going to turn the draw size up, and I'm going to tap that. That's perfect. That's what I'm looking for. So that's a neat looking horn there. So let's go ahead and rotate around. Make sure that these are sitting where I want them to be sitting. And I believe they are. Let's take that end point and maybe move that up. There we are. Look at it from the front. Good. I like the look of that. So what I will do is just tap somewhere on the model. The curve goes away. Control click drag once, clears the mask. Control click and drag a second time will execute Dynamesh, and it will actually make these horns part of the model. So we'll let that finish. Because it's a very dense Dynamesh, it'll take a little bit longer. But it's often that, when you're working on something in a pipeline, someone asks for changes. So you'll have to go back from your subdivision model, turn it back into a Dynamesh, add some changes, and then we'll do the process again where you just retopologize it and then project it back onto the original. And that way you capture all of your detail, but you're able to make big changes to the model's volumes without any sort of pain and discomfort. It's all quite easy to do. It takes a bit of time to show how to do it and talk about it, but if I were doing this as I do every day in my own workflow, I can go back and forth between a subdivision model and a Dynamesh pretty quickly, and I do it multiple times throughout the life of a project. So that Dynamesh is now complete. So we will go ahead and turn off Dynamesh, duplicate this model, and now we're going to retopologize it by going to Z-Remesher, setting our target polygon count. 4,000 faces should be fine. Just make sure X symmetry is turned on, and then click Z-Remesh. Now we will carry on sculpting the horns once it's remeshed. And basically, we could have just added the horns. We didn't have to delete part of the model. I just wanted to show you that you can go back into Dynamesh and both add and remove parts of your model and then bounce it back into a subdivision model, going back and forth between the two modes as you're working. And it's very seamless, and it's not a very intensive process. I do it multiple times throughout the course of my workflow. And once you understand it, it's very simple. And I feel like it's something you should understand early on, which is why I've placed it so early in the chapters of this tutorial series. I think being able to balance the strengths of both Dynamesh and subdivision modeling are integral to doing the best possible work you can in ZBrush. You can do amazing work with just Dynamesh, but I don't think it is nearly as straightforward to achieve the type of subtlety of form that you probably want to get with your work if you're constantly dealing with millions of polygons with no ability to step up and down subdivision levels. So this allows you to have both of those tools at your disposal anytime, at any point in your sculpting process. So we'll let the Z remesher finish, and when it finishes, we'll come back and take a look at the projections. And there we go. It is completed. So now I am going to press Control D to add a subdivision level. And let's go to the subtool menu, go to Project and click Project All. Now make sure you have visibility turned off on the eyeballs. If you don't, the mesh will try and project onto the eyeballs and it'll mess up the eyes. So click Project All and you'll see it will start to project onto that mesh. So just take a second. It's projecting those details. There we go. And we'll divide again and Project All. And there we go. So if we switch between the two, go back to our original and the remesh, you see they are identical. So we can go ahead and delete this one. So I'll delete that subtool. And now we can step down our subdivision levels and we can smooth the horns, for example. Let's step back up and smooth again. Step back up. And that's going to make it easier to get those nice and refined. Let's step down. I just want to get that little angle there. And then step back up. And let's carry on smoothing those. Now if we go to frame mode, you see that we don't have any polygroups, so I'll just step back down my subdivision levels, go to B for brush, S for select, L for lasso, Control-Shift-click on one of these edges here. Let's zoom in so we get the very, very base. So we can hide the ring of faces going around that horn. Let's grab this one here. And it looks like we're getting a bit of a spiral on that one, so let's try this one here. And tell you what we'll have to do then. Let's go ahead, because we're not able to get the perfect ring, we'll just hide these, and then manually hide this. And then we'll just go to Visibility under the Tool menu. And we'll click on Shrink. And then we can just shrink that down and then manually hide the pieces that we need to hide like this. Now I will go ahead and reverse my visibility, go to Polygroups, and click Group Visible. Now we're able to isolate those horns more easily than we could before. So let's go ahead and step up our subdivision levels, and we will mask the horns. And we can go to our masking menu, and we can also grow our mask. So if I go to Grow Mask, I can extend that mask down. There we go. And if I Control-Shift-click on the mask, oops, let's go to B for brush, S for select, R for rectangle. So if we Control-Alt-click, we can sharpen that mask. Then I'll take the Clay Tubes brush and just build up the base there. Do a little bit of smoothing and build up that horn where it intersects with the skin of the head. Let me invert that mask. And let's turn off frame mode so we're not looking at the polygons, we're actually looking at the surface itself. Shift F, zoom back in, and we can take our damn standard brush and we can just put some striations along the length of that horn. Just gives it a little touch of detail. Do the same thing around the back here. And we can also smooth this to get rid of some of those facets there. There we go. And a neat trick you can do for things like horns and bones and hard surface pieces, if you go to Geometry, under Geometry there is a clay polish. If I open that, turn up Sharp and turn up R Sharp right here, and then click Clay Polish, it will sharpen up that area, just like that. So we'll clear our masking now. And any other little areas where maybe we got some errors in the projection, we can clean those up. And there we go. So now we've added geometry as well as subtracted from the geometry. So you're never stuck if you switch into a subdivision model. You can always bounce it back into Dynamesh and carry on working from there. I'm going to my clay tubes brush. I'm going to select Alpha 1 this time. I'm just going to build up a little bit of anatomy here on the neck. I'm just going to go through, and you can just always keep nuancing this stuff and keep working on it. But it's time to get on to the next chapter. So I'll just do a couple more little pieces here. Step back up to our highest level. And there we go. Let's turn off solo. Go back to our eyes, turn them on, and then turn off the full body version. So there you see we've got a version which is just a bust with horns, and we have our previous version here which has no horns but carries the full body. So that is how you use Dynamesh. Dynamesh is an incredibly powerful design tool. You can carry on modeling and sculpting without any need to worry about the volumes of your mesh. Unlike working from a sphere or an imported model, where you will ultimately be limited to the topology that you brought in, this frees you from any of those types of concerns. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's clarified how to use Dynamesh. And you can go on and start experimenting with it on your own and seeing the different types of things you can create using the insert mesh brushes, using the insert primitives, and using Dynamesh together. And again, I got to stress that workflow of bouncing back and forth between a subdivision model and a Dynamesh, I think that's very important. And the best rule of thumb is once you've reached a point where you don't need to add any new volumes to your model, I would turn it into a subdivision model and do the rest of your sculpting there. I would try and avoid putting any details into a Dynamesh because you'll be fighting against the loss of detail each time you Dynamesh it. And also, you really want to be able to work on the form before you start putting lots of detail down. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next chapter.